Thank you especially to media reps for coming today to this press conference. We really appreciate it. I want to thank my colleagues as well from the various provincial groups that are assembled here today. I'll briefly introduce them. I'm Raymond Ford with the Ecology Action Centre. I'm the Senior Wilderness Coordinator. We also have with us, if you could just raise your hands, this is not in the order of the table, but Bob Bancroft, President of Nature Nova Scotia, Gretchen Fitzgerald, the Director of Sierra Club Foundation, Mike Lancaster, the Coordinator for the Healthy Forest Coalition, Janet Barlow, the Executive Director of Hike Nova Scotia, Andy Green, one of the Directors of Friends of Nature, Eleanor Cure, of Extinction Rebellion, and Angela Giles of Council of Canadians. I also received a message from one of our folks out there just a little while ago. We heard back from the KMK office who said they are supporting what we were doing, or the Assembly is supporting what we're doing, but they didn't have enough time to respond and come here, so they will speak in their own way at their own time. Of course, we should acknowledge that we are on unceded Mi'kma'ki territory, the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people, and that we are here in Chiboucto. And because of the short nature of this, we only knew that, or found out Professor Lahey was releasing his evaluation document last Tuesday when it came out, and not before. We've had to scramble to put this together. The minister said he will respond in 2 weeks, and so we are in between the release of Professor Lahey's assessment and that official government response. So today, the groups assembled here are calling on the Nova Scotia government for an immediate moratorium and complete cessation of all harvesting, forest harvesting on public or crown lands in Nova Scotia until the recommendations of the Independent Review of Forestry Practices, authored by Professor William Lahey and his team of experts and released in 2018, are fully implemented and operational. This call comes following the recent evaluation document, highlighting that the province's ongoing failure to actually implement the recommendations from his 2018 report, all 45 recommendations, and change destructive harvesting practices in Nova Scotia. Lahey's recent evaluation report confirms what we have been seeing on the ground and what Nova Scotians across this province have been saying, reporting, defending, decrying, and even going to court or to jail to stop. The situation has reached a breaking point. We do not take this position lightly. Rather, we do so in light of Professor Lahey's assessment document and in light of the history, the sorry history of reports followed by inaction by all three parties over more than a decade of promising change and failing to deliver. I would like to just highlight a little bit of that history for you. The only thing so far has been a lot of trees in a lot of reports, and this is not all of them. In 2007, the Progressive Conservative government under Rodney MacDonald created a groundbreaking piece of environmental legislation called the Environmental Goals and Sustainable Prosperity Act, and promised a whole lot of things, and a number of them were achieved, including a new natural resource strategy. That was in 2007. The Phase 1 report, Our Common Ground, The Future of Our Natural Resources, came out in March of 2009. This was a large public consultation, 29 public meetings across the province, thousands of people attended, and hundreds of written submissions. The executive summary said, "The status quo cannot sustain the biodiversity of our natural environment, enhance the economy, or preserve the rural lifestyle so valued by the citizens of this province. During the citizen engagement process on the future of the province's natural resources, Nova Scotians made it clear that change must happen in all areas of natural resource management and happen soon. In its conclusion, it said bluntly, across Nova Scotia, a resounding call for change has been voiced. Current natural resource practices for all uses and all users is not sustainable. That was 12 years ago. The Phase 2 report involved no less than 18 experts, 4 panels of review, 3 each, 3 experts on each one of them. We have one of them here, Bob Bancroft, who helped author the Forest report. And there was a Uber panel overseeing it all, chaired by Chief Justice Constance Gluby, retired and now unfortunately deceased, Joe Marshall from the Mi'kmaq Chiefs, and Alan Shaw, industrialist and businessman from the Shaw Group. In the Phase 2 report, called A Natural Balance Working Toward a Natural Resource Strategy of April 2010, Chief Justice Gluby, in her remarks from the chair, said, and I quote, "The status quo is not an option. Unless there is change, Nova Scotia's natural resources will continue to be destroyed." That was 11 years ago. In the final phase, the government document, the actual policy, called The Path We Share, a Natural Resource Strategy for Nova Scotia, was released in August 2011. The department committed to a new approach to natural resource management in 4 distinct areas: minerals, biodiversity, parks, and forestry. The signature commitment, besides a new approach, was a 50% reduction of clear cutting within 5 years. And then in each year, they produced a self-congratulatory status update on all of the wonderful paperwork they were doing. And they kept coming. And then we received the 5-year update, where they walked away from the 50% clear-cutting reduction commitment at the 5-year mark where they were supposed to have hit it. They abandoned it, and essentially, it seems, largely abandoned the entire natural resource strategy and all of the commitments that were made. In 2007, the Liberal government, who walked away from the clear-cutting commitment, then decided to have another independent review, because that's a great way to kick the issue down the road and not actually do anything, is have another review. And so Professor Lahey was appointed, along with his expert team, for another independent review of forestry practices. In 2018, months before, just weeks before, the Lahey report, as it's euphemistically called, or the Independent Review on Forestry Practices, was released, the department issued a license to 14 mills, which include Northern Pulp and the big sawmills in this province, and even biomass harvesters who export our forests for biomass to be sent to places like Europe and Great Britain, which I think was scurrilous. It should never have been done. Regardless, that was done just weeks, within like 6-8 weeks before, and I'd have to check, and I would urge our media folks to double check whether I'm correct on that timing, but from memory it was just before Lahey and his expert team released their report, and they created the West Fork Consortium and gave them essentially all of the unprotected forested lands in southwest Nova Scotia, all of the Bowater lands that were not included in any protection, which there wasn't a lot of, and they've been hammering away at them ever since. Southwest Nova Scotia is being hammered, probably worse than any part of the province. It seems as if there's a real run-on there, and the West Fork Consortium, in our view, is too big. Their allotment is way too big, and they should be either seriously reduced in the amount of wood that they're allowed to access on Crown land, or just removed altogether. So weeks after that, in 2018, Professor Lahey releases his independent review, and you can see in that review he was not very pleased about the West Fork deal, because it cut off options for things like community forests, Mi'kmaq forestry initiatives, and other less harmful, less industrial opportunities to do ecological forestry. So his independent review, along with his expert panels, many of whom are not from Nova Scotia, that's an important thing, I think, because they could see things a little bit differently than perhaps folks who are astute in the culture in Nova Scotia in the industry. And it recommended 45 specific recommendations that were interrelated and quite a well thought out, complex and interrelated set of recommendations that were very prescriptive. If there was one criticism that resonated over and over, was repeated over and over about the natural resource strategy, and it wasn't prescriptive enough and specific enough, I would disagree with that, but Professor Lahey, being conscious of that criticism, was very specific, and it is an integrated package. And he said, here's how you do it. So any excuse that they didn't know for sure what to do, that it was too general, not after the Lahey report. The centerpiece of the independent review was to create a triad system on crown lands or public lands for ecological forestry with 3 legs. The protected areas leg, the high production forestry leg, which is meant to be the smallest of the legs, where industrial tree gardening would be allowed. And the largest amount of public lands would be the matrix lands. No, not a science fiction movie, but rather where the primary management objective is the health and diversity, biological diversity of the forest, with some what you might consider light touch forestry or uneven age management would be allowed. I think by any measure, it was a compromise. There was something for everybody. Pure conservation, better forestry on the bulk of the lands, and then the high production forestry, which, frankly, I think probably all of us don't really like, but I'm sure the industry doesn't necessarily like all the protections. So there was something for everyone, but everyone had to accept a little water with their wine, so to speak. This was the compromise that Lahey recommended. Last Tuesday, Professor Lahey released his progress evaluation report after 3 years, and the findings were that there were no change on the ground. Lots of paperwork, lots of studies, lots of policy work. I'm a member of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on this matter, and I can tell you there has been a lot of busy work and a lot of paperwork and a lot of thinking and studying and considering and research and yada, yada, yada. But the one thing there isn't is any change on the ground. And he also found significantly that important natural stands of forests that would otherwise end up in the protected or the matrix legs or lands are being clear-cut, and that opportunities for those other legs, the protection leg, we need to be mindful that there is a new 20% protection commitment in law now, and we're at 13 today. So where are those lands going to come from? Mostly from the crown lands or public lands, but if they're trash, then what is there going to be left to protect? Similarly, the matrix lands, the ones where we're supposed to have this much more holistic approach to forest management and biodiversity management, are also being clear-cut. It would appear that there is an end run around the Lahey report. The new government has given itself 2 more years before delivering, for a total of 5. That's an awful lot of years. So here's Professor Lahey's report. I forgot to hold it up. It's pretty big. And here's his new assessment. So again, we are calling, with all of this history, where we've lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 years, we could have been doing better forest management and better biodiversity management and better ecosystem management. Instead, a massive amount of paper has been created, and people's time and effort and experts and all of that have gone in, but there's been no change on the ground. And that has to stop. And so, as I said, we don't take this demand lightly, but we are calling on the government to stop all harvesting on crown lands until this gets sorted out. Everybody get out of the pool when it comes to our public lands until this gets sorted out. So, that concludes my official remarks on behalf of our group, and we have some very intelligent, knowledgeable, and expert people here with us. And I would invite any of the media members here today to ask questions of our august panel, and we'll just take them as they come, and we will hang around later if you want to ask anybody any individual questions.
Sure. Can I ask, it wasn't that long ago that folks, some of you while sitting at the table, had asked for a moratorium on clear cutting on Crown land. The government did not do that. So what makes you think that they will do this, which is obviously a far greater step than what you were asking for just a few months ago? And whoever wants to answer that, if you could do it at the mic so that we can get the volume, that would be terrific.
Well, nobody's going out. I think one of the points that Ray made is what I would expand upon, is that we've now reached this kind of critical mass point where groups like many of the groups here and many others have been calling for a cessation of clear cutting for about 2.5, 3 years. So we don't know what else to do. What is it going to take? We've got Auditor General reports, we've got Supreme Court cases, we've got the Assembly of Mi'kma'ki calling for cessation of harvesting around moose lands. We don't know what else to do. This is, from my perspective, the Healthy Forest Coalition perspective, this is equally about forest ecology as it is about forestry industry. I personally make a portion of my livelihood and income off of forestry operations. I want to ensure that I can have a viable future in that field for generations. It's something that we need to start planning for, that industrial value. How do we secure the future of sustainable forestry? And Lahey's report card, as I've been referring to in it, the evaluation of progress of implementation, says that this is harming the future for sustainable forestry operations. So that's kind of that's the newest development that really makes the case. This is not about ecology, this is not about protected areas, this is also about tourism values, this is about forestry values, this is across the board. We're damaging Nova Scotia's future if we continue on the status quo.
Does what the professor said in his report last week reflect what you've seen out in the woods from a day-to-day basis as you're out there working and doing your thing?
To say that it was cathartic to see this report is an understatement. We've all, I can't speak for everybody, I know that I've been seeing this happen on the ground for years, so to see it kind of encapsulated in this report card was very affirming in the way that we've seen things progress. It's very frustrating to see how the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables has a definition of a clear cut, which is if you remove anything more than 40% of the forest, it's a clear cut. So it's been frustrating to see both government bureaucrats and also politicians claim that we've had a reduction of clear cutting, but there hasn't been. And in terms of their own definitions, there just hasn't been. So,
in your experience, has it been the same level of clear cutting going on, or have you seen more because of sort of for a different thing?
It's been relatively consistent. It's kind of hovers usually between 80 and 90% of the harvest on public land are clear cutting, as in fitting with that definition. When you hear variable retention, mosaic cuts, kind of the various categories that can be assigned, they're all still technically clear cuts by the department's own definition. I think I'll let others answer.
Yes, and I would, to try to answer the question a little bit as well, Michael, Professor Lahey's assessment or evaluation document cites 4 causes or likely primary causes for the lack of movement on the ground actually implementing. And the first 2 are reluctance and a culture problem in the department itself. And the other is resistance from the industry. As I said earlier, we don't make this call lightly, but we feel that it must be done now, that we cannot afford to lose more of our public forests to industrial clear cutting, that there's a real rush on to get at it before it's all gone. And I think that if the government were to stop all cutting on Crown lands, you would find that the resistance to actually implementing these recommendations on the ground, remember that the SGEM, as they call it with their jargon, the Forest Management Guide for the Ecological Matrix, is out. It's ready. It can go. It was 5 revisions before it was finalized and it's ready to go. There's no need to delay. So, other than to delay, if all of the Crown Land licensees are not able to access Crown Land, I suspect they would sharpen their minds and their pencils very quickly and get the bloody thing done. But as long as the default is to continue to clear cut, then this will continue to drag on, and we may in fact see Professor Lahey's report end up where the natural resources strategy ended up, and we will be 15, 20 years without any real change. Please, Bob.
I've been in this whole business as a biologist for perhaps too long. Didn't really think it was going to go the way it did. Shortly after the Lahey report came out, I couldn't find it for anybody, but I remember a fellow by the name of Alan Smith, a former Bowater employee who was employed in DNR at the time, sent out a mandate to the companies about projected changes they were going to have to make to their operation. Within about 2 weeks, it was retracted. The point I'm trying to make is that there are ways of implementing quickly, and they didn't do it. And I'm standing before you here today, I'm telling you that it bothers me to be a biologist because we're used as window dressing. When I took the job back in the 70s with what was then Lansing Forest, we euphemistically thought we were actually going to be working with forestry people to make sure the forests were healthy for wildlife. And it's been just one kick in the head after another for almost 50 years. They know better. It's greed. And this department is a rogue department and has been for decades. It's not acting in the public interest. It's not acting in the interest of a healthy nature or a healthy forest. To just back up what Mike said, they've degraded the habitats that animals need to the point where even the forest is not going to be able to grow back properly. One of my fellow employees actually did a letterhead for DNR back then, and he called it Department of Mud and Bushes. And that's where we're headed. You don't have to be Haiti to get rid of all your forests. You can look at Scotland. They did that, a combination of pasture and deforestation. And a lot of the woods didn't come back, simply because the soils are so depleted, because the trees don't fall down and rot back in the ground and create a new crop. There's a lot of science here. But what's happening is, and I'm sure as reporters, you're tuned into what's going on around the world. There's a 50% decline in wildlife species just in Canada alone. And many of the other people here today, I think Gretchen's going to be after me, so I'll stop on that one. But I just think that we should be sharing this province with other species that are here. And it's just outrageous that greed and that department can take the industrial commercial interests ahead of healthy habitats that most of us live here for. And when people like Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, I expect people like Jane Goodall to say we're trashing the planet. I mean, you know where she's coming from. But when Mark Carney says that we're trading the planet for profit, even the economists are watching. So you ask why now. It's gone way too far for too long. And Michael, I think we're watching at Eleanor Pure and Extinction Rebellion. People are camped in the woods right now. We've gone to court several times now. We're going to do what we have to do to stop this in the interest of not only nature, but of the people of Nova Scotia. They don't believe in clear cuts. They don't believe. And it's public land. It's not it's public land that they're plundering for private profit. And I'll shut up now.
Thanks, Bob.
Great. After you.
So ditto that. I mean, I think it's very clear from Bob's remarks and Ray's presentation that things have to change. We all watched the UN climate discussions in Glasgow, where the Prime Minister of the host country, Boris Johnson, said climate change and biodiversity loss are two sides of the same coin. And in my many years of watching the catastrophe of forest mismanagement in this province, and yes, the unequal influence, the unfair influence of one industry on what is supposed to be the path we share, to quote the title of one of those reports that Ray held up, is a crime. And I think people are waking up to that unfair influence, and they're also waking up to the fact that this is a crisis. We agreed as a province we are in a climate emergency, and our forests and our friends from Nature Canada and other organizations put out a report earlier this year showing that not counting for the carbon that intact, healthy, not degraded forests and soils can store is immense. And we, as Nova Scotians, every day that we don't fix this problem, are destroying that incredible space for all the species that we treasure, but we're also destroying our chance at meeting climate targets and making the impacts of things like flooding, things like forest fires, much worse. So it isn't fair that one single type of industry is having a say over what is supposed to be shared land, and according to treaties is actually unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. It has to stop, and I think it is going to change for two reasons. Because people like Bob, and like Eleanor, and like Ray, and like Pike Nova Scotia, and the Healthy Forest Coalition, and the Council of Canadians, and Friends of Nature, are being joined by many, many others. And I think we all witnessed the climate marches we saw here, some of the biggest marches I've seen. And politicians were there. The pressure is on. We are now feeling the climate emergency. We very much know in our bones that we are losing the precious species that we're supposed to be protecting and are actually responsible for under various pieces of legislation for protecting. So I feel the pressure is up. And also, let's face it, we have a new government. And this government brought in a pretty strong piece of legislation. Not strong enough. But this new government did come in saying they were going to do some things differently and be more open and be more transparent and be more accountable.
And implement Lahey.
Well, I think they have to disentangle the influence of the clear-cutting forest industry, and they have to face the facts that this is the end of the road, and we need to stop before it's too late.
Eleanor, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Please.
Come up to the mic.
Okay.
Just before I do, I see some scribble on your name tag, which makes me think I should check the spelling of your last name.
Yes, my last name is K-U-R-E.
Great, thank you. It was mentioned the folks affiliated with your group who are down in the woods right now, down in Annapolis County.
I just got back there from this morning. I slept there last night.
Can you tell me your sense of folks' willingness to continue doing things like that and doing like what happened down in Digby County if you don't see the kind of change you're asking for today?
Yeah, we have a really good, large group of people who are volunteering and don't want to quit. Getting in the way is what we're doing. We can't stand it anymore.
Thank you.
Any other questions from perhaps any of the other reporters?
One thing I might like to mention, the area that volunteers and Extinction Rebellion and other good folks are sleeping out to protect right now is called the Last Hope Wildlife Corridor. It's near Beals Brook in Annapolis County. It's only 60 acres. It's not very big because there's not much left to protect. But this area, quite a long time ago, it's got a history of being one of the last places that Nova Scotian hunters were able to find game to hunt in the past. When game was already becoming scarce, this was apparently known. I'm not sure what the history how long ago this story is from. But this was apparently an area that was known as a place where you could still have a chance to get some game for your dinner for your family. And so this area was protected, and what's the bill? Mersey Bowater? Bowater. They spared it. So a long time ago, there was people around that area that knew it was important and said, please don't cut this down. We need this as a wildlife refuge so that we can still have some wildlife here. And Bowater spared it. And now West 4 is going in and they want to take it. And it's due to be cut any day now. And so we have people there. There's, I believe, Doreen Bernard is going to be doing a water ceremony soon. And people are camping out 24/7 to try to protect it.
How long have they been there?
It's been at least a week now. It's all very recent. We just found out recently that it was slated for cutting. And I was there last night. It was cold.
Has anyone from the province or West 4 been in touch with the protesters there yet?
I'm not sure. I was busy working, and so yesterday was the first time I was able to get myself there and help out. So I could definitely put you in touch with people to ask more questions, for sure.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I can answer the question.
Come up.
They were, okay. Owners been too busy in the woods, which is a good thing. No, the people that contacted DNRR, I guess it is, have said that they're going to proceed. The key here is, and what the industry has done is they've used the harvest plan system to bank a whole bunch of things, and I believe that this particular parcel was okay 3 years ago under another system. And just like the area where the blockade was last year is now actively being cut as a traditional moose area since it was known and researched in 1981. But they deliberately let them go in under an old plan and when they say that the guidelines are in place and whatnot, they're grossly inadequate.
Special benefit.
It's designed to bring fiber out of public lands for private profit. It's not moose management. I'm a biologist. I started studying moose in the late 1960s as a student. What kind of browse they need. They're a complicated animal, just like we are, and they need more than browse from cutover areas, which is very poor forage incidentally.
That photograph over there is from a moose concentration area in the St. Margaret's Bay area.
And these signs that you see about the species of risk, I mean, there's more than moose involved here, folks. And there's more than species of risk involved. We're going to have a lot more of them, I'm afraid, with what they're doing. Because the ability of the land to sustain life is being diminished grossly when you take away all the trees that would normally add their litter to the floor of the forest and make it grow.
The government's legislation gives the government up to 2 years to implement Lahey. If things continue as they are for the next 2 years, what condition will the forest be in?
The last big wood basket is in the. Feel free, other people. I'm just up here, but the last big wood basket. They've already creamed Cape Breton. I can show you aerial photography of that. That's just central and eastern, where I live. The last big wood basket is the Bowater land they bought, and 2 more years, and already the approvals that they've got built up, banked, not based on a new system at all, is going to let them basically flatten the rest of the quick forests on Crown land. The cheap wood that keeps wood prices low. So if you're as a private woodland owner are trying to get a price for your wood, it's not there because they'd rather go to the Crown because they can get it cheaper. Even the roads that the moose will avoid once they're built are being paid for by the taxpayer. It's really a rigged system, and I agree with everybody at this table. It's damn well got to stop. We're not the only important thing in Nova Scotia.
I've got a good follow-up to that.
Sure. roads, Bob mentioned the roads, so that is one of the big things that harm mainland moose and other species. Punching logging roads into their habitat to get some trees, it's not just about the trees they take, but the roads they leave behind and what follows behind, white-tailed deer, motorized vehicles, and so the moose leave. And they are already in secondary habitat, and they're just one of many. There's pine marten, there's lynx, there's many of our songbirds are declining because they are old forest dependent species, and we have almost no old forest left. And so those logging roads are a problem all by themselves, and if you total them all up, you could go like around the earth more than 3 times, all the logging roads and highways and so on, and those logging roads are also permanent deforestation. Think about it. We probably have 5% or more of our forest that is just gone and will never be back because of all these logging roads and landings and so on. So I just wanted to add that.
The question about what would a delay of 2 years look like? The average public harvests for clear cutting is in the ballpark of about 20,000 hectares a year. So, seeing that we've been waiting for 15 years for this reduction of clear cuts, that means that we've seen about 300,000 hectares of clear cuts when we could have been doing better, and we will see an additional roughly 40,000 hectares of clear cuts. So, in the interim, that would be 340,000 hectares, which would be about 3 times the size of the Togiatic Wilderness area, which is the largest protected area in Nova Scotia, at about 110,000 hectares. So we've lost 3 Togiatics, and we'll lose half of 1 more if we wait another 2 years.
Well said. Any other questions to anybody?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We're going to hang around for a little bit if any of you want to talk to anybody here in the